We have got a great episode today. We are working on electrifying our UTV. We are continuing with that progress right here, right now. Hello and welcome back to Gears and Tech. Hopefully you've seen our other videos already going over electrifying this Jeep UTV. If you haven't seen those already, I strongly encourage you to go check those out first because we're just continuing the progress today. We're continuing with that job. For those of you who have seen it and are fully caught up, let me just recap where we're at right now. So this here is the Jeep UTV. I got this from Princess Auto up here in Canada, which is equivalent to the Harbor Freight in the United States. It came with a 200cc engine, which you can see right here. Now this, it's obviously been stripped out, but this is a 200cc fuel injected Honda knockoff engine. This Jeep came with a solid rear axle, which made the turning radius horrible. We have got the new electrified axle kind of roughly in position here. Today, we are going to go through the process of mounting this axle. So we're going to get the motor mounted into the axle. We're going to get the axle perches welded onto the frame, and then we're going to get the U-bolts holding the axle on. And by the end of this video, I will have this in there, and we will have a rolling chassis Jeep again when this video ends. Now, if you want to look at electrifying your UTV, quad, whatever, the kit that we're using, I'll put a link in the description for it. We got it on AliExpress. You will have to wait for it. For this whole install, currently in just hardware, we are in for around $3,000 plus the price of the Jeep itself. Before we get too far into this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel down below. If you've seen some of our content already and have not subscribed, we want you to join our community. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and let's get back to the video. So this isn't like a super cheap upgrade, but it's a necessary upgrade for what we're looking for. And in our other videos, we already talk about why we're doing this modification. But so far, the modification has actually been very simple. It's been pretty straightforward. I'm hoping today is the same, but warning, I'm going to be doing grinding, I'm gonna be doing some welding, and we're gonna be doing some measuring and mock-up and stuff. If you are not a welder, you are not a grinder, you're not good at fabrication work, this step may stump you guys. It's gonna be pretty simple, it's gonna be pretty basic. I will walk you through the modifications that we're gonna do so that you can see it and say, is this something that I want to do? Now, the nice thing about doing this mod is that this carriage here came from the Jeep. So it was already bolted into there, and the engine, the original engine, was just mounted inside here. So I don't have to get too fancy with any of the geometry. You can see, if I come around over here, the springs, the suspension is already part of this. So this whole thing was held in by just 4 bolts. So it had one on each spring and it had one on the front to hold the whole thing in. So it's like a full floater rear end. Mounting this is not going to be too difficult. And in fact, if you didn't want to weld, you could possibly try and bolt these holders in. So our first step is going to be to just get the geometry all measured up and try to line up those axles where they need to be in relation to the Jeep, because this is going to be important. So right now, this is just sitting on here. I can slide this around, as you can see here, like that'll slide while I try to set it in place. This axle is also not attached in any way. I can rotate it still like that. So nothing's been fixed into position yet. The first important part is just going to be figuring out where this goes relative to the whole car. Luckily, the axle that was on here was bolted on with these, so it just had these bearings here. And I know that in between the 2 holes is exactly the center of where the original axle position was. So I can actually go over here. You can see a bearing hole there and a bearing hole there. So I should be able to just center that up. And if I really want to get perfect, I can measure it to be exactly centered. And then I can come over to this side and do the exact same thing and just kind of slide that over like that until it's centered. Then we'll get the welder out, we're gonna tack that in place, and then we can do a proper full weld prior to painting it all up. But it's not gonna be that hard, actually. So I'm gonna get the welder out, and then we'll get this all measured up and centered. So we've got the welding cart out. Now, for those of you who aren't used to welding or just don't really think about welding, this is a power fist welder. Again, I got this at Princess Auto. It's just like an off-branded cheap welder. I got it on sale for like just over $100, and it works great. I have built a car trailer with this welder, and I was able to put cars on that trailer and actually haul them around safely. So this thing is capable of doing all the welding that we need to do. This is a 230 volt, 60 hertz welder. It has wire speed. It also can use gas, but I'm not using gas. I'm just using a flux core weld. And typically, when I weld something like this, I go full heat, full speed, and, well, not full speed. I go full heat. There's 4 settings for heat. This chart here tells you which settings to use. Basically, a guy who knows how to weld, that kind of taught me how to weld, he said the real easy way to tell if your welder's set up right is when you're welding, if it sounds like bacon is sizzling. If it sounds like sizzling bacon, you're set up right. If it sounds like pop, 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 then that means that you probably have either not enough feed on your wire spool or you have too much heat. Now, personally, I like lots of heat. So if it's going pop, 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 I'll turn up the feed until it sounds like bacon. Now, the guys who do actual welding are gonna say, well, you gotta look at the thickness of the material, you gotta look at the 2 types of material that you're bonding together, and then you have to make an educated guess on what kind of heat and what kind of speed you want. Now, this is pretty thick stuff, and I know all you welders out there are looking, and you can see that I have not prepped this metal at all. I haven't stripped the paint off. I find if you get the heat high enough, you can burn the paint right off and get a good weld anyway. And I'm gonna show you what a suitable weld looks like. This is not gonna be a perfect weld, but it's gonna be a weld that's good enough to hold this axle onto this perch, onto this frame. And I'm gonna show you that. Now, for lining it up, I've just drawn a black line across the front edge of the hole, and then I've done the same over here. Now, I'm only welding one at a time, so I'm gonna just tack this one, and then I'm gonna come over here and figure out that my measurement's still right, and then I'll tack that one. So all I've done is just tied this on. Now, I'm using the millimeters, and I don't know if you can see my line, but I'm at about 15 millimeters there. Now, if I check over here, the distance to this hole, again, is about 15 millimeters. So that means that this axle will be centered between this hole and that hole, which is how that axle over there was mounted on here anyway. So that'll put this axle roughly in the same spot that the old axle was. So we're gonna do a quick tack on there, and then we'll tack that side, and then we'll do a proper weld. So I know you're wondering, what do those welds look like? Well, that's it right there. And that's it right there. This one I'd say is probably the best one out of them. It's got good adhesion, got tons of penetration. If I come over to the other side, you can see the same. That one's looking good. This one's probably the worst of them all, but I am gonna come up the underside here and do a bead across both sides of there as well, just to be sure. Now, I'm not too worried about this coming off because I'm gonna have U-bolts on here clamping it down too, and I think that's probably good. So this is raw steel, so it should be painted, otherwise it will rust. But you can see kind of that's the welding that was required. I did point out that there's holes in there. I don't want to touch it, it's gonna be hot. If you really could not weld this, you could drill a hole right through there, all the way through the frame, and have a bolt coming through to hold that in place. And that would work as well. You just have the risk of it kind of rotating on that bolt hole, but it probably won't. And if you needed to, you could always do like some self-tappers to help stabilize it from twisting. So that would be okay if you did not have a welder. I obviously do have a welder, if you have a shop and you're doing stuff like this, I strongly recommend you have a welder too, because it just makes so much more sense. So the next step for me here is to get the motor mounted. And the reason I need to do that is I only have like a 1/2 inch of clearance once this motor's in from the side of this frame. So I got to get the motor on now, and then we'll line up our bolts for bolting this thing on. Status update, we have the perches welded, we've got them painted, we've got the axle back sitting on here, and now it's time to try and mount the motor to this. So we're just gonna tip this up and stick this back on the perch. And then I should be able to just stick the motor right in there. So this is our motor. Now this motor is a 3,000 watt, look at it, just trying to get away there. 3,000 watt motor, interesting. I was not expecting that. That must be for some sort of speed sensor. It's got 3 wires, which is not a problem. And it's not AC, it's DC. 60 volts DC, max 4,200 RPM, and it should bolt right up into that housing through there. So what I got to do now is see where the bolts are. You're supposed to hold this in. I don't think these are them, but they might work. I wonder if that's what those are supposed to be. So I was trying to figure out what these were. There's 4 of them. I've just been kicking them around on the ground. I thought they were for this, which is for the shock mount. So normally this would weld on to the axle, and then you could mount a strut on there similar to what we've got here, these guys. But because I was already reusing the frame, I didn't need to use these at all, because this will just attach to the existing frame. So this has grease already in it, which is great. So it should slip right onto that shaft and bolt up. And we're just gonna put this, I think I want the wires facing up. There we go. Stick that in, like that. That one like that. Oh yeah, that's a good fit. So that motor is now mounted. It's bolted on like this. It just slipped right in, as you guys already saw. The next thing to do is align everything left and right on the axle. So what I got to do is roll it into position, and I've got a kit here that I'll show you guys right now. And this is it right here. Now this is a U-bolt kit, as you can see there, for mounting trailers to a frame. Now this axle that's on this is exactly the same as a trailer axle, so I should be able to just slip that over there like that. And then it's got this top hat, which will just go on the bottom, hopefully nice and nicely, and then we'll bolt that on. So I'm not going to tighten anything down, but I can at least get these into position. Like that, and like that. And hopefully this frame is narrow enough. Seems like it is. And like that. Of course, I didn't open my bag of nuts first. So we got a lock nut and a thing. So we'll go like that. We'll go kind of crossways here. Again, we're not looking to go super tight yet, because we got to just make sure that this is going to fit first. And we can get the alignment before we cinch this down. Even that might be too tight already because I could feel it holding a little bit here. And I don't want it to quite yet. But this will at least keep it from falling off. I'll show you guys what this looks like. So these are just regular trailer U-bolts. They go around the axle and then they go around the frame. Normally this would be a leaf spring on a proper trailer, but in this case, it's a little frame of some sort. So you can see I've left these loose so that I can slide this axle left and right, but this should allow me to rotate this motor roughly into position. So if I go like this, you can see it just wants to go right there. There. So it's touching the frame right here. Hopefully it needs to go that way for the alignment, but we're just gonna use the good old-fashioned tape measure for this. Got it aligned, you can see I gained the slightest little bit of space there, which is perfect. So now all I did for this, I measured off of the back of the disc, the brake disc, to the inside edge of the frame, and I just made sure that this distance is the same as this distance. That should center the whole thing on the frame. You can see my differential is off-centered that way, which is perfect because the motor just fits. Now, if it didn't just fit, my backup plan was to notch that frame if I needed to and kind of build it out and around, but I did not want to do that, so I'm very happy that this worked. The next thing, I think that this bottom of the frame actually sits horizontal with the ground when it's in, so I actually want this motor to sit in line with that plane. So I'm gonna adjust that next. That's gonna be important because this differential actually has the drain hole here, and that is set so that when you're filling it, you'll have fluid exactly halfway. So if this is tipped the wrong way, I won't have as much fluid and I will not be lubricating this rear end as good as I think I should be. So now it's time to really, I think I'm gonna just mark the tubes here so that I know where they're at. And then I'm going to bolt this down and make sure it doesn't move while it's being bolted down. We are making progress. So this is now bolted. The axle is fixed. The motor is tight. It is about level. Now I can fine tune this adjustment once it's in the Jeep. So I'm not too worried about having it perfect. But what I do want to do is get the speed selector hooked up now while it's out. Otherwise it's going to be hard. So I should be able to just roll this right over. We'll try and just roll it like this. Ugh. There. That should hold that there. And then I can untangle my brake line. So I don't want that tangled up in here. We're gonna do cable management after, but we do need to just make sure that all this stuff is out of the way because we are almost ready to actually marry this thing back into the Jeep. I think I'm gonna undo these because they're just gonna rattle around and I don't actually need them. And we'll hook that gear shifter up. Do I want to hook that up? I think I can hook it up after. And that is it. We have a rolling shell back together. We've got the back end on. Let me show you what we've done here. So you can see we've got the bolts in. Like I said, it was just 2 bolts. This bolt here, and then this guy here that held the suspension on. Come around to the back. Here you can see the whole rear end attached. So it's floating. We've got our trailer bolts here and over there that hold the axle onto the frame. Exactly how we said before. We've got plenty of clearance over here for our tracks. We've got clearance on the motor. Now the motor is tipped slightly up actually based on the angle it's on right now. I may drop that down, I'm not sure yet, because I want to make sure I don't have any clearance issues where I've exposed the motor to be damaged. But our suspension is functioning properly. You can see I can bounce on this thing. It does exactly what it used to do. The big difference now is I've got way better turning radius now because I actually have a differential instead of a solid axle. And that thing is looking good. Now, next steps. Not in this video. We have a lot of wiring to do. So we've got to get the battery in. We've got to get the wiring all done. We've got to get, you can see the space here. If I look kind of at an angle, see how this just fits into the wheel well? The spacing's perfect. If I come back here, you can see my track width is great, but if we go look at the front, oh, it's atrocious. It's so bad. So if I come like this, my track width on the front is really narrow compared to the back. So I actually have some wheel spacers we're gonna stick on the front to push those wheels out a little bit, but I may have gotten too big. I got 2-inch wheel spacers. The front wheels might end up sticking out farther than the back, but we'll find out. You can see the old wiring harness is still here. I haven't finished cutting that out of the car yet, but we'll get that out of the way. And then back over in here, we have got so many goodies. We got this guy, the 3,000 watt motor controller that hopefully connects up to this whole thing properly and just works. I got lots of wires here. We're gonna figure out what to do with them all in a future video. Hey, thanks for watching all the way to the end of this video. We hope you enjoy the content in this video and we'd love to have you come back. Consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And for those subscribers who are looking for that extra special thing that you can do to support this channel, consider joining our members group. That's where we're building this community, the Gears and Tech community, where we can all enjoy content together. You'll get special perks, which we'd love for you to check out by clicking the link down below. For those of you who are just happy to watch the video, that's okay too. You can check out some of our other content right over here, where we've got some previous videos that have already been uploaded and enjoyed by many of our viewers already. We do hope to see you again. This has been Gears and Tech. Have a great day.